Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. We are glad that you are here with us today. My name is Laura Forehand. I'm here with Carl Forehand, and we have a guest that we need to get to and talk to. But before we do that, what would you like to share with us?
Is that instructions for me to get on with it instead of dragging things out here? Just got back from the book signing or book sales at the farmers market today. That was pretty fun. You never know who I'm going to run into or how many old church people are going to ignore me. But then the bookies kind of come eventually, not bookies like loans and things like that, but the book people.
The people that want to buy the books.
The book people kind of can't crawl out of the woodwork and from their hiding places and purchase a book and slink off away. Anyway, that's
all good.
Yeah. There needs to be introverts somewhere in the world, right?
Right.
So, and those are my fans.
Yeah, there you go. The introverts are your fans. Right.
Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be at the Goose in a couple of weeks, the Wild Goose in North Carolina, by the way. So that we'll be able to speak and we get to sell books and things like that. So that's exciting coming up. But we don't want to take a lot of time because that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk to Jamal.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell us who he is.
I will. And I'm loving the bio. So, and like I said to both of you before we got on the air, I'm going to do my best not to mess anything up. So, but you guys know me. I at least mess up one word, maybe two, as I read the bio.
Well, we love you.
Jamal Broadnax was born in Reidsville, North Carolina. He has 4 daughters, Jamia, Destini, Skylar, and Christina. Oh, I pronounced that one wrong. Tell me her name.
Kristian.
Okay, Kristian.
What I used to be.
Okay. Jamal is a former fundamentalist Christian and pastored his own church from 1999 to 2019. In late 2019, Jamal walked away from church, Christianity, and organized religion altogether. It was then that he began a new spiritual journey that would lead him into an awakened, conscious, and always evolving and expanding spiritual journey. He is the founder and facilitator of the Consciousness Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, a weekly gathering that focuses on personal empowerment, self-discovery, and celebration of the human experience.
And I'd like to go to that.
Me too. That sounds pretty amazing, actually. Jamal is a highly experienced public speaker, certified master hypnotherapist, certified master NLP practitioner, and certified personal success and life coach. With his proven and effective modalities, Jamal helps people experience positive change in any area of their life. He specializes in helping people release negative emotions, overcome bad habits, and heal past trauma. Jamal is passionate about his work and has personally experienced the positive change that his modalities can bring to people's lives. Through this work, he inspires and empowers others to achieve their full potential. And then the rest of it is how we can get in touch with him. And I want to save that to the very end so we can make sure that people hear that at the very end, because I think how to get in touch with you is really going to be important for our listeners to hear. But thank you so much for being on the Desert Sanctuary, Jamal. And we're so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I listened to the bio and I'm like, who is that guy?
Yeah.
It's good.
Jamal, we consider it a privilege when people tell us their story. We think that's a sacred thing, and we take it very seriously. We've been able to hear over 270 stories from people out here in what we call the desert, and so we wanted to have you on and have some mutual friends, things like that. And I wanted to hear your story and have a conversation with you. I'm anxious to get started. So let's start with your story in whatever detail you want to tell that. Part of it's kind of what she read from the bio, but fill in the gaps for us, please.
Absolutely. Wow, my story. Goodness gracious. Every time I have the opportunity to share my story, it's odd, but I'm always at a place where I'm like, what? How do I tell this story? You would think after telling it so many times, but but it's an honor and a privilege to share my story, and it's a journey. The story, the last chapter is not written. I remember before, and I'm getting right into my story, but before I walked away totally from Christianity, when I was still pastoring a traditional church, I remember I would tell them the last few things before everybody ran away from me. I would tell them, it is written and it is being written. So my story is still being written, but let's bring us up to this point. So I was born in a fundamentalist Christian home. However, I did have the one benefit, that was I was raised by my grandmother, who was definitely very religious, strong Christian, who loved what we call God, and she was in a Baptist church at that time for the first few years of my life. I lived with her, had a great mother. I give honor and gratitude to my mother, because she was a great mother. However, for whatever reason that honestly I don't even remember, I don't know, but for whatever reason I stayed with my grandmother, and I stayed with my mother on the weekends. So the benefit that I had, although raised in a very Christian environment, or with Christian grandparents. My grandfather was a deacon. Grandmother was just very involved in the church. The Black Baptist church, it's kind of like almost like the Pentecostal church, almost, So, she would, do her religious thing with the shouting and praising God or whatever, but she never brought it into the home. And I didn't even really recognize that until I was an adult, probably in the last few years, to be honest with you. And I thought about how beneficial that was for me, that we went to church all the time, okay? Revived. I tell people I was on drugs. I was drugged to revival, drugged to Bible study, drugged to prayer meeting. I was on drugs, okay? But, but with all of that in the home, all I experienced, it was not, come on, let's get together, let's join hands and pray. And no, the only thing I experienced in the home was just what it's like to be a loving family. We laughed, and did we ever laugh? Oh, that's why I'm so silly right now. Carl probably knows that. But it's just because it was my grandmother. She just, it was like she would do anything to make us laugh. So I had a very loving environment. And I just want to give gratitude to my grandmother who's going on, but for not really forcing, although I did take on that persona, okay, I did, but she never forced that on me. Only thing she showed me at home was just how to be a love creature. Okay, so raised there. Then my aunt, because my grandmother did not drive, grandfather became disabled. He fell off of a ladder and could no longer drive. My aunt that lived next door was the person that took us to church. When she passed away, the church van or whatever would come to get my grandmother when she wasn't taking care of my grandfather. But we all lived in the same neighborhood, the whole family. So the other aunt across the street went to the Pentecostal church. All right. So after that, pretty much everybody, I'm trying not to make the story too long, but pretty much everybody evolved into leaving, except my grandmother, evolved into leaving the Baptist church and went to the Pentecostal church, which I call my home church. Still honor that place too, Jerusalem United Holy Church of America. Now, let me say this as well. Another thing I must give gratitude for is my bishop that was the pastor of that church, Bishop Elijah Williams. I cannot remember. I was so fortunate. I don't remember one dogmatic sermon ever. Not one in my life. The only thing I ever heard from my pastor, I heard it other places. And again, I took on the persona and I began to preach the messages of hate and all that kind of stuff. I did. But my pastor never, the only thing I heard him talk about was grace, freedom, love. And he would tell his experience, tell stories, about his family and kind of use those analogies and bring them into his sermon. But beautiful. But I was at the Pentecostal church. I started preaching there when I was 18. No, I was 17 going on 18. I'm now 47, maybe. 40
something.
Yeah, I think 47.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm 47. I'm getting ready to turn 48 in a few weeks. But so I was 17, 1993. I did my initial sermon there at that church, June the 13th, 1993. My first message was very condemning. I'm ashamed. I would never even listen to it myself today. But I was basically, actually, that's probably an appropriate message. It was called The Mask of Righteousness. I was kind of telling everybody off about how they were pretending to be righteous. And they really, you know what? That wasn't so condemning after all. That was truth, But anyway, gosh, this is the first time the story went this way. Y'all got me having an awakening experience here.
All right.
But so anyway, I started preaching at the age of 17, going on 18, 1993. The denomination I was in, the United Holy Church of America, sent me to my first church in 1999. They sent me to St. Mark United Holy Church in Greensboro. And I pastored there for 5 years. I was always a little different, but I pastored there for 5 years. And then in the beginning of 2005, first Sunday of 2005, I stood in my pulpit the last Sunday of 2004 in December and made an announcement to them that today will be my last Sunday. I think I know what my funeral will be like because they were hollering and screaming and like, no, I regret that I was young, didn't know, wasn't thinking about how that should have went, but I did it after the benediction and everybody started crying and boohooing or whatever. And then I started my own church in 2005, the first Sunday. That is what evolved, honestly, into where we are now. Somewhere, and I did definitely believe the fundamentalist view. I saw my God as the God Yahweh. I never noticed the true characteristics of this Yahweh that I was, reading about. I always saw him as a loving God, and when he get mad and kill everybody, that was love. That's what love does. Love kills it. No, not quite, but they deserve that. They disobeyed God. You understand?
Yeah.
It all made sense to me back then, and even though it's nonsensical at this point in my life, but I I continued in this new church I started in 2005. I continued to preach the same message, but it's like it was a progression for me. After the first few years, these different types of people started to come into my church, like people that I knew. They didn't say this, but I knew that they were same gender loving people, and they were coming into the church, and I didn't have it in my heart to hate them. I could not.
Mm-hmm.
And my message began to progress, began to change. I began to kind of teach. I stayed away from the Old Testament, although I believed it, but I began to teach love. I began to teach compassion. I began to teach the grace message. But I still believed in hell, So it was kind of like, as long as you're not practicing, you can be a homosexual, okay? As long as you're not practicing, you're not going to hell. That's kind of how it was with me, okay? Mm-hmm. And what kind of changed everything, and I feel like I'm rushing through the story, so please forgive me. But what kind of changed everything is in, I want to say about 2000. Oh, goodness. All of my devices are ringing. I do apologize. That's the sad thing about Apple. I had my phone silenced, but now the MacBook is ringing, the iPad is ringing, the Apple Watch is ringing.
They're all talking to each other.
I know. But I don't know if you're familiar with Bishop Carlton Pearson. You may have heard that name.
Yeah.
Bishop Carlton Pearson.
Tulsa? Yeah.
Yeah, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Bishop Pearson, I want to say that may have been like 2007 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And when he began to awaken, he came out with this book called The Gospel of Inclusion, right? But when Carlton Pearson first made his started transitioning away from fundamentalist doctrine, what he was saying was, and I know his views have changed now, but what he said at that time was, everybody's saved. They just don't know it, basically. That was his basic message. Everyone's saved, they just don't know it. I started listening and judging that message. Mm-hmm. But he came on a local talk show here in North Carolina. And I called in so I could argue with him, okay? So I called into the talk show and I said, Bishop, so if everybody's saved, then who's going to hell? I knew I had something right there. You hear me? I said, if everybody's saved, Bishop, then who's going to hell? I'll never forget his answer. So nice, so calmly and collected. He said, whoever Jesus did not die for. I didn't know what to say. It stunned me. Yeah. But it's kind of like in hypnotherapy, there's a critical faculty, okay? And it's like you have to, in order to reach the subconscious, that critical faculty has to be removed, and you have to kind of put that person into trance. And there's different ways to do that. That's what happened to me. When he said that, it shook me up so bad. It's like for one moment, I had clarity of thought. Mm-hmm. And he reached past the critical faculty and sent a message to my subconscious and made me start thinking. Mm-hmm. That was where I began to evolve. Mm-hmm. Although I didn't accept his message, but it did something to me. It made me go back and start reading and start studying. I became what I call Nicodemus by night, Nick at night. I became a Nicodemus because back at that time, there was no video online, but he had recordings on the internet. I would go back and I would sneak. Nobody knew. I would listen to the recordings of the various people he would bring on. And they would say things, and they would say biblical things. And I'm like, no, the Bible doesn't say that. And I know I've read it from front to back, cover to cover. And then I would go in my Bible and find like, dang, it does say that, And so it just began to evolve from there. Mm-hmm. And in late 2019, just something happened. It started from then, but something finally happened in 2019. It's like literally, and it's hard to explain. It's almost like literally somebody came and I turned that light off on purpose because it's almost like somebody came and just turned on a light. And I'm like, what is this I see? This is different. Something's not right. And also within me developed this deep passion to know more about this God that I said I was committed to. So I began to study. Like I thought I'd already studied. I thought I was a scholar, even though I really wasn't, but I thought I was a scholar already, but I began to study, to do what the Bible told me to do, study to show yourself approved. I studied and studied and studied because I wanted to know more about this God. But the more I studied, the more I realized I didn't know about this God. And I didn't like what I was finding out about this God. You understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost like I studied my way out of Christianity. Like something happened and I'm like, no, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't resonate with me. This is something's not right here. And I dared to continue to read and continue to study. But then I decided, you know what? Because number one, I thought it was wrong. I've never went outside of this Bible. Okay, it's time to study origins. Let me find out where this Bible came from. You understand? I mean, I knew about 1611 and I knew all of that, but it's like, no, that's something I'm missing. Let's go back to origins. And long story short, I new information, I began to awaken and evolve, and I'm still evolving, even now, and discovering who I am, because I realized that my identity, which I always thought my identity is in quote unquote Christ, Jesus, God, Yahweh. But I found out, no, that's not my identity. That's not who I am. That's not me. I'm a much better father than that guy. Pardon me, but what he did to his children, I'd never do to mine. Right. That's not my identity.
Right.
That's when I began. And it started with Jesus, to be honest with you. When I awakened, my journey started with Jesus. Not so much now, but that's okay. If some people still there, but I had to give him up too. I did, but it started with Jesus as I awakened, and I began to look at different things that he said, according to the narrative, like the kingdom is within you, stuff like that. And it caused me to go in and look for myself, I should say, not look at, but look for myself. And I found me, and I'm still on this journey of self-discovery. And it's absolutely amazing. It's better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. I thought I had it all with my Pentecostal experience and the goosebumps and all of that kind of stuff, and the prophecy and the gifts. I saw it all. I did. I saw the demons being cast out. I thought all of that stuff, healings. I saw it all, but nothing can compare to finding me. I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to shut up.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, we know, I'm pretty sure Kyle Butler, and we consider him a close friend. He's just a dear person. And people like him talk about all the time, they talk about going inside and finding and trusting yourself, learning to trust yourself. We were taught not to do that.
Yes.
Because we couldn't trust ourselves. And it makes so much difference when you're out in the desert, once you begin to discover who you really are, and whatever, the God language you want to use around that, you find what's true about God too, in the process. I'm really curious. This series is called Leaning Forward. So we're talking about moving on. I like that you use the word evolving instead of reconstructing, because we don't want to put back together something that's broken. We want to move on, and we want to discover who we are, like you're talking about. Is there some unique challenges for the Black church? I've noticed when my rehab for my stroke, I had a stroke 18 months ago. My rehab was in downtown Kansas City, and I heard African American people talk about their faith and their communities, and it's different than my experience.
Mhm.
They're deeply embedded,
Very much so.
in that. So, what are the unique challenges moving forward for that community, or does it not matter? I mean, you would know. So, what do you say about all that?
Now, are you asking the unique challenges surrounded around that I'm experiencing from that community, or the unique challenges of the community itself?
Yeah, I really want to know both.
Okay.
I want to know all of it.
Yeah.
I'm ignorant about a lot of things. So,
Good question. I think those are great questions.
yeah.
Well, it's very difficult for that. I'm trying to word this properly. I want to say it's very difficult for that community, but here's the thing, and maybe this is any fundamentalist Christian, maybe, I don't know, but from what I'm seeing, it's hard. It's very difficult to come out of slavery when you are a happy slave who doesn't know you're a slave.
Mm.
If that makes sense. That may sound like a riddle here, okay?
Mm.
But it's very difficult when you're a happy slave that doesn't know he's a slave, because you don't want anything else. And anything outside of that, you're going to condemn, you're going to criticize, you're going to reject, because you interpret that as, oh, they're trying to take my freedom. No, I rebuke you. No, I don't receive that.
Right.
I'm not gonna, take my freedom from me, not realizing that you're a slave that needs to be set free. So that's the worst slave, is a happy slave that doesn't know he's a slave. And what I see, and again, this could be universal, but what I see in my community, okay, that I grew up in, the Black church. I did, well, let me just stick with that. In the Black church, I see a lot of happy slaves, man. Mm-hmm. And they don't want anything more because they think they have it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it helps their imprisonment, but hurts them, is the fact that as a Black community, for many years, okay, we experienced oppression. Mm-hmm. And that oppression, and here's the thing, I thought about this just this past week. This has only been, even though slavery, was abolished much longer than that, not too much, but it's only been about 60 years. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's only been about 60 years since the civil rights movement really started to make a difference in our country, or in the South anyway.
Right.
So you've got these individuals that see, because the church was, let's put it this way, the church was the mechanism that helped to start. There were other organizations, but for the most part, the church, it was the meeting place where people gathered to discuss the civil rights movement and to encourage the Black people and the white and other races that gathered to help and facilitate that movement. The church was a major part of that. It was the meeting place. It was also the place where the speeches took place and the gatherings of encouragement and seemingly empowerment. So here we have in the African-American or Black community, we have God as the backdrop, if you will, of the civil rights movement. So it's like we owe God, in a sense. It's like we owe God the gratitude for our freedom.
Mm.
You know, God is what they ran to. What is that in the background? Oh my goodness!
I don't know. It's
It's on my screen.
yeah, it's like Tom and Jerry or something.
I'll let him play if you don't mind.
No,
We're okay.
I had my fireplace scene going. I guess it ran out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like God was the empowering force, or the church really was the empowering force, which is associated with God, that helped to make this movement possible.
Mm-hmm.
And God was what people ran to, you know, the melodious, harmonious sounds of music, you know, we shall overcome, and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also, and get this too, here's another difference, Carl, in maybe another community and the Black community, and why it's a unique challenge, okay? Because during the week, okay, where probably not great-grandmother, but maybe my great-great-grandmother, maybe my great-grandmother, well, I knew her, but you know, where she went in and worked for her, it wasn't called a master at the time because slavery was over, but you know, she worked for her white employer, cleaning his clothes, taking care of his kids, nursing his kids, his and her kids, and all of those types of things, and had to walk on the opposite side of the street. All of this, you know, this oppression. But it was like Sunday morning, though. Oh, but Sunday morning, that's where we can be free. You go to the church and you experience this exuberance of joy, and it's the only place where you felt freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you felt accepted. It's the only place where you could be empowered, because this is the only place where a Black man, and in some places Black women were pastors, but it was the only place where a Black man could be in charge and could feel like he's somebody. So that is the unique challenge. That's hard to let go because it's embedded within the DNA of most Black people.
Mm-hmm.
See,
That makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. And then whatever toxicity develops there, whether it's the toxicity of beliefs or practices, or just what goes on in communities or what goes on in an organization, sometimes they're easier to ignore.
absolutely.
If the dopamine rush is big enough, you know, and
Boy,
you know, we confuse dopamine with the Holy Spirit sometimes, but really, you know, as much as any group, or probably more than any other group, it seems like they had a deep sense of community, you know, and a commitment to each other and things like that. And those are good things. You know, not the situation that surrounded it, but that's a good thing to have a community, to have people you can connect with that love you. And
but that also brings up another unique challenge, Carl. And I hope I didn't cut you off. You may have been getting to that very point.
You're good,
but
man.
That sense of community, and it was hard it's still a little difficult for me, because that sense of community that we develop, you know, because of our history, you now are afraid to disappoint these people. So you don't really want to walk in I do. I mean, I have no problem, but I'm just being generic here. You don't want to walk in your truth. You know, I'm generalizing. You don't want to express that, hey, I no longer believe what you believe, because you don't want to disappoint grandmother. Yeah. You don't want to disappoint, you know, because it's such a strong community. Oh man, let me tell you, hurt me so bad. This was about 2 years ago, and I was still believing in. I was not a fundamentalist Christian, but I still believed in God and the love of Jesus. But I was very vocal about not being a biblical literalist. Okay. And I remember my aunt passed away. This was during COVID, actually. My aunt passed away, probably 2020. She passed away, and after the funeral, we gathered at my uncle's house. they always asked me to pray.
Mm.
Always. They would this has been through a lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, we're joining hands and getting ready to pray over the food. And the pastor, my aunt's pastor, well, the pastor that preached the funeral, I don't think he was her pastor, but, we joined hands and he looks at me and he said, Bishop, called me Bishop still. He said, Bishop, you go ahead and pray. My aunt looked at him and said, no, you pray. That hurt it hurt me at the time because I was still believing in God, and I could have prayed, but anyway.
Yeah.
When you were talking, this word or two words came when you were explaining kind of like this, kind of this hold, I guess, with the Black church. And I kept thinking, when you have this gratitude, right, it's hard to pull away from that. So the words that came to me were trauma bonding.
Woo.
Yeah. Would you say that some of that might be happening? And I think it happens in church, period. But would you say that could be part of the experience of the Black church? I don't want to generalize or anything, so you speak to that.
I would say, maybe not, you don't want to generalize, but I can speak from my own experience. Yes. An astounding yes. Yeah. I would say it's most definitely trauma bonding. It's not love. It's not loving God and loving church. No, it's a trauma bond indeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Trauma bond is like an addiction,
Yep.
So you look for that, you need it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it kind of clothes itself, if you will, in this feeling of belonging, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, how strong is that? We all, we're born with this innate sense of wanting to belong. And so then when you do, and then the whole concept of trauma kind of gets muddied, it just really.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I want to know, one of my first thoughts was, if I go down this road, I started similar to you where I would, I'm questioning whether God can love homosexuals, and I'm questioning Satan and hell, and I'm starting to question these things. And favorite thing that Christians say sometimes is they say, well, be careful, be careful. You're going to slide down that slope. You're going to, I haven't seen that. Now, granted, I can name some people for you after we get off the mic that have double crossed me out in the desert, or they, did things that were hurtful to me in the desert. So I know everything's not perfect. Mm-hmm. But the question I have is, though, is your life, and maybe how is your life better since you started evolving in your faith, in your beliefs, your life, your journey, whatever you want to call that? Is your life better?
I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Very, very easy to answer. And it is so much better. I would even describe to the Christian community, I would describe it this way. I finally found what, according to the narrative, your Jesus said he came to give, and that is life and life more abundantly. I feel like I'm finally living that life. I thought I was, but I never lived that life in my Christian journey. All I know is peace and security, because when you lose the fear, see, all of that is attached to fear, the insecurity, the lack of peace, all of that is attached to fear. I lost the fear, the very thing they say I'm supposed to have. I lost the fear of God. When I lost that fear, it took a while. It took a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so much better, Carl.
Yeah, that's good. We like hearing that. What is your advice to others? I mean, when you were a pastor, a bishop, I'm sure you were the answer man. Everybody wanted to ask you questions.
Unfortunately.
And when you have a fixed belief system, you stop learning, you start defending, and you start answering questions like that. But now, what is your unsolicited advice to people out in the desert? People, I've gotten goosebumps a couple of times while you're talking, because I feel like you're genuine and that it's everything you're saying is coming straight from your heart. So that's good. So, what other things would you like to share? I don't know, maybe a question I haven't asked, or sometimes we say, if you had a billboard, what would you put on your billboard to tell the whole world?
Yeah. I think I would probably say, find the you inside of you that's been waiting to be discovered all of your life. That's what I would say, because there was a true, authentic self within you that it's just waiting on you. I mean, it's there and it's waiting on you. I mean, you're not going to find that identity outside of yourself. And I even see, like, when I like the fact that you brought up the fact that I didn't use the word reconstruct, but evolve, because I never know where I'm going to be the next moment. So I can't call myself anything. I can't call myself a Christian. I can't call myself conscious. I can't call myself awakened, because I'm evolving. Tomorrow, I may find new information or learn something new or discover something, within a new reality. Sure. Then I'll have to change my title. So I don't use them.
Right.
But, I'll say also, just never stop. Never stop. Once you come to the point where you say, this is it, I've discovered something, this is it, okay, you become stuck.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a new religion, okay? That's what it becomes.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm just open. That's where I am. I'm very open. I went through a season of the tarot and the oracle cards where I used those. I still have plenty of them. But at a certain point, it's like, I don't need those anymore. Nothing against them.
Right.
I'll occasionally do a reading for myself. And then I got to the point where it's like, I don't even know if this is real, I think all these cards, it may be a coincidence, but what I learned, even if it's a coincidence that this card comes up, I think any card that I choose, something within me can find, it'll resonate with me in some way. There's a part of me that will find usefulness for whatever that card says, or find a place I can apply that lesson or that principle, you see? So just be open and keep evolving. That's what I'll say.
I like that, because I think I struggled with that same thing with, like, well, what do I call myself now? I don't consider myself a Christian, and it's just funny how we don't want to be labeled, and yet we're always looking for a label to put on ourselves. Yeah. I think it gives us security in a way. But I think the more you do that internal work, you realize that, that's where your security lies, and you don't have to have this label to make you feel safe and secure. I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about the Consciousness Center. So can you speak a little bit, what is that about? I'm very curious about it.
Sure. Hate to say unfortunately, but unfortunately, it evolved from my church, okay? The last church that I started in 2005, that is what became the Consciousness Center after everybody left, I always leave out parts of my story, but I was quite successful, in the pastoring. The first church I went to, I came there when they sent me there. They had about 30 people. Before I left, about 5 years or less, I'd grown the church to over 200, which, it's not a mega church, but it's fairly, when the average size church in that denomination probably was about 30 people, so I was doing very well. But the second church, I ended up growing that to maybe about 150 or something like that. But when I began to share and teach, even before I left religion altogether, but when I began to teach more grace and more love and compassion, and I was telling you guys about the homosexuals who start coming to the church, and I would teach differently, and I would dare the church. I would kind of fuss at them, and don't you ever judge anybody. I remember telling them one time, church was full. I said, I don't care if a man comes in this church wearing a full dress, high heels, and a pocketbook. You better not say anything to them. I said, leave them alone and let God do the work, is what I basically was teaching.
Yeah.
So, and I promise I'm leading to the answer to your question. You can tell I was a preacher because I'm long-winded. But I began to teach things like that, and show more grace. Remember, this was a holiness Pentecostal church setting. A lot of the people, some of them loved it, the younger people, but I had a lot of elderly people too. They didn't like that for the most part. So they began to drop off because you're teaching this loose gospel or whatever that is, You're teaching this anything goes gospel. They begin to fall off, but they fell off enough where I could start saying anything I wanted to say. So in the end, I started saying, you know what? The Bible is not the word of God. The Bible, still a Christian. And I said, the Bible are words of men about God.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, yeah, that's true. Well, I guess when they got home, they were like,
what did he say?
Right. So that kind of stuff right there caused people to begin to fall off again. And finally, I grew the church from 200 to about 30. And then I really started talking my stuff, And so as I began to awaken, I brought all of that into what I called the church. At that time, it was Unconditional Love Church. I changed the name because it was called Greater Destiny for a lifetime. Mm-hmm. But I called it Unconditional Love Church. And that name and the setting just allowed me to begin to start teaching something different. And then when I got brave enough to start really calling God, Yahweh evil and stuff like that, then I lost the last few, spirit-filled Christians I had in the church. Mm-hmm. And it became the Consciousness Center because I started just talking like I'm talking to you right now. Started talking about how to find you. It still has, by the way, I wanted to keep the musical setting. I'm a musician, by the way, so I love music. So we still do, the way it starts on a typical Sunday, we have a meditation. Okay. After the meditation, we have maybe a song or two. I've taken some of the old gospel songs, changed the words. There was this song, actually the song came from the secular industry and they brought it into the church in the 1970s, I think. Originally it was by Gladys Knight, and then James Cleveland took it and changed it to Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. But Gladys was talking about the love of her life.
Okay.
So I took that song, I took it back. I said, give me the music back. Church stole it from the secular industry. I'm taking it back. And I changed it to finding me what's the best thing that ever happened to me. So we sing songs like that. And then, we have either myself or someone else will share whatever is on their heart,
Love that. That's good. Very cool. As you were talking, I don't know, things just pop in my head, but this is something that Carl and I kind of discuss. We're just surprised, like when you were talking about like somebody who's homosexual or trans or just, maybe a cross-dresser or whatever, walking into a church building. And it always surprises me. And I used to be that person. So I'm not like pointing fingers. I'm really not.
Right.
But it amazes me how the marginalized condemn the marginalized. You know what I mean? Oh, granted, I'm like a white female, but if you want to consider like women maybe are, marginalized in some respect.
Definitely.
Men,
Definitely.
you know, but and then for me to sit there and marginalize the homosexual community, like that's just been really sticking with me lately, like to take a really good look at that, because I think it's so easy for us. And I think it goes to, it's just something that we're uncomfortable with. We don't want to sit in our discomfort. So we marginalize or, you know, exclude or whatever word you want to put on it. So I think it's always interesting to me that, you know, especially like a church community where we say everyone is welcome, or, you know, we even say that, you know, Christ would say everyone is welcome or whatever, but they're not. So I don't know, that just, when you were talking, that's kind of the thought, it just keeps coming up for me. And so I take a really strong look at that, especially in my own life. You know, am I marginalizing people, you know, because that's something I don't want to do anymore. So anyway,
Brene Brown says we have common enemy intimacy. You know, that's when we gather together. A lot of times, what we call community is sometimes just common enemy intimacy. We all hate the same people,
right?
Even if it's the
yeah, and that's really easy to do. I mean, you see that, or we've seen that, I should say, in churches. You know, and when you were talking about, you know, preaching grace and love, I mean, that was the exact thing at our last church that somebody, or like after Carl resigned, somebody stood up and said, well, now we can get a preacher in here that doesn't preach all that grace and love. Less grace.
Out of here.
Seriously. And one of his last sermons was on, you know, loving the homosexual community. And this person sat in the audience and shook his head, and his face turned all shades of red. And so
blew his head off.
Yeah. So it's crazy. It's crazy. But before we you got another question. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't want to stop this train.
Yeah. So you do NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and things like that. People still say to us, I've been in church all my life, I've never seen trauma. And they say things like, I'm sorry that happened to you, but we haven't ever experienced that. And I sometimes say, if I get the chance, maybe it's you causing the trauma. You know, that's why you haven't ever seen it. But just your opinion on that whole thing. People come to church because they're hurting.
Yeah.
They have an assumption that the church is going to help them. And I think pastors and churches want to help people.
Yes.
Sometimes we're not that good at it. Do you see, you know, everybody's gearing up to be trauma coaches. Is it justified? Is that I just want your opinion about all that.
I mean, it's definitely justified. I just hope it's not a passing fad, you know, popularized, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just hope, for me, the reason that, and I fell into this field, I say by accident in a sense, but I always knew that I was a healer. You know, that's just within me to be a healer. And I felt after leaving Christianity and pastoring in the traditional sense of the word, I just knew I had to find a better way to help people that really does solve problems, okay? That really gives solutions, because the Bible was not given solutions. Church experience was not given solutions. It was definitely given temporary relief. You talked about the dopamine and all of the endorphins, you know, all of those things. So that definitely brings satisfaction, okay? You know, but that's the same satisfaction you can get from going to smoke a joint, okay? Which I don't do, but I'm just saying you can.
Or a concert.
Yeah, or at a concert. I'm glad you said that. You know, I had to think about it. Like, darn, you're right. I remember at a Michael Jackson concert I watched, they were doing the same thing we did in church. I mean, everything we did. Hands lifted, screaming and hollering, dancing, and get this, and falling out. They were doing that too.
Yeah.
Man, that's church.
Yep.
But yeah, Carl, I just hope that I'm going to say two things. It's justified, and there's a need for that. I think it's a much fields such as coaching and hypnotherapy, things like that, far better way to help people to heal. I do agree with that. However, just as in the pastorate, let's just hope, and it is my hope, that these are qualified people that are trying to help these people.
Right.
I was talking the other day, and I'm not, no offense to you, any of you, if you did this, anybody watching or yourself, but going online and taking a little I hate to sound demeaning, but taking a little certification with Udemy or whatever. Oh, God help me, I said names. But, and taking a couple of hours and then taking a test, reading some material, taking a test, that does not qualify you to help somebody heal like that. Just make sure you're getting the right preparation to help people.
Yeah. I would like to see us take a lot of the money we used to send to churches and appropriate that money to getting people real mental health counseling and real deep inner work, from professionals, and pay, help old pastors go back to school.
Yeah.
Because biblical counseling, in air quotes, didn't really ever help us. But what if we trained all the, if the pastor's gifted in that area, and is like you, has a heart like you, let's use some of that money for that. And the people, what we usually see is our job. We picture ourselves sitting on the edge of Christianity, kind of out in the desert here, like a booth, point people to the experts we know, the people we know that can help them. And I don't have to save everybody like I did when I was a pastor. All I have to do is listen to their stories, and sometimes that's healing. But also then I can love them, show them empathy, things like that help in their healing journey, but also point them to people that can really help them.
And I think too, I like what you said about, it's more than just like reading a book or taking some tests or, I've been doing some online stuff with Trauma Informed. I'm a school teacher, and that's like a big thing right now in so many schools is having Trauma Informed classrooms and things. But here's what I am learning the most through everything that I'm reading and everything that I'm doing is that it helps me figure me out first. Like there's healing I need to do first.
Yes.
It's not about I'm doing this so I can fix you.
Right.
I'm really doing this because there's been a lot of trauma. And for so long, I'm like, why am I like this? And not, that sounds very condemning or whatever. But, through all of this, I'm learning more about myself. And really, you have to be healing yourself before you can reach out and attempt to heal. And if it does nothing else but help me to sit with someone in their pain, I'm good with that. Because I think that in itself can be part of somebody's healing, is just being believed maybe for the first time ever. And they have it. Yeah.
Good.
So before we leave, because this was part of your bio that I didn't read because I wanted to save it for the very end to make sure that people really heard it. But can you tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to know more about the work that you do, or just they have questions for you? How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. I don't check it as much as I used to, but Facebook Messenger, That's a great way. If it pops up and I happen to see it, I do try to check it at least once a week. Okay, my messages. So Facebook Messenger, and there you'll see the title. It'll say Bishop B. Jamal Broadnax. So it's Bishop BJAMAL Broadnax BROADNAX. You can reach me there, or you can email me at my personal email, and that's bjamal75@gmail.com. Again, that is BJAMAL and the number 75@gmail.com. Those would probably be the best ways to reach me.
Hey, great. And it looks like it says that you're on Facebook. So is that your main social media?
That is my main social media. I use Instagram, but I don't, haven't quite as crazy as it sounds, haven't quite figured the functionality out completely. Okay.
That's because you're old like us.
I guess. I agree. My kids would agree anyway.
Oh,
Man, it's been so much fun today.
Yeah.
The time went really fast.
It did. Oh my.
We'll get back together sometime in the near future and do some more of that.
For sure.
I would love that.
Yeah, like I said, this is healing to us. In the 270 that we've done or so, everyone is special and unique, and it enriches us. It helps us. We have there's a big deal with pets now. They want you to give them enrichment. And so you give them a bowl with
cutouts,
dividers and cutouts in them where it's harder for them to eat, and they call that enrichment. But this hasn't been hard at all.
No.
But going through the struggle of technology and things, and the fireplace not working, and our audio, maybe that's our enrichment. But
there you go.
There you go. Yeah,
enriching for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is every time. So we appreciate that. For those of you that are listening, we thank you for tuning in. Support Jamal in his work, but also connect with him, because every interaction I've had so far I've enjoyed. So make contact with him, get to know the people he knows, and I think you'll be better off for it. And as always, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.